What is up, guys? Pappy here, and in today's video, first of all, I would like to apologize. It's been a while since I put out a video. I think it's been 7 or 8 days, a little bit over a week since my last video, and I apologize for that. No promises on being able to make videos sooner, as I'm trying to make these a little bit more thought out. So if you like today's video and definitely like the video, subscribe if you want. Let me know in the comments. But right into it, we're just gonna go ahead and jump into it. I wanted to go over some speculation I had, as you probably gathered from the thumbnail and the title, of what I think the third Darkness subclass is going to be, using what we know about Strand and Stasis mirrored against our current three light subclasses. So right off the bat, I want to show y'all some comparisons. So solar and stasis are opposites of one another. You could think of solar as, fire, and stasis is ice, or you can think about it as solar is the heat from the expansion of the universe, given form, and stasis is the slowing or the stopping of that expansion of the universe. Um, on to Void and Strand, as most people tend to think that Void and Strand are the opposites of one another. Void is the nothingness of space, given form, is the best way I could think to put it. It's the space between planets and stars and asteroids and everything else. It's the nothingness in the universe, given form. Kind of like gravity, or maybe dark matter or something. I'm not a scientist, so I really don't know what to exactly to compare it to from our world. But Strand is the thing, as they showed us in the showcase. Strand is the thing that is within that nothingness. It's in between. It's the fate. It's the strings of fate that hold our reality together, and it's what we can grasp and use to our abilities, to the best of our ability as guardians, and how we've interpreted uh, this new ability, and we're grasping at the strings that are what we can only assume really is just what is holding our reality together, and it's what exists in between the nothingness itself that void is. And so that's why, at least that's why I think it's the opposite. um and using that kind of like mentality and thinking, um we're able to look at arc and look at what it is, and what it is. It's electricity, it's lightning, it's that kind of stuff. But also, what does it represent in the Destiny universe, and how can we look at what it represents and what it is, and mirror that, and see what the third subclass, if it was to mirror Arc, then what could it be? What's it going to do? Um, so first off, I like to look at it as Arc is a positive energy. It provides life, as in, our brains, probably because, neurons, electrons, and stuff are firing in our brains and all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm not any kind of biologist, scientist, anything like that. So, rip me a new one in the comments. But, our body and muscles and our brain and everything is controlled by electricity. So maybe electricity or arc can represent life itself. Arc is also what powers most, if not all, of the technology in the city, along with the technology that the Fallen use, and many other of the alien races. It's one of those kind of blurry lines in Destiny's lore where we see other aliens using arc energy, but arc energy is also light based, and so other things can use light even if they don't have ghosts. So, it's kind of weird to me, and maybe I just need to refresh on my lore. But arc also seems to be, just another word for electricity in Destiny's world. And we just use light to amplify that arc energy, and we get our light subclasses and powers and grenades, melees, and supers, and all this other kind of stuff. You know, so arc is kind of a positive, life-based, technology driven kind of thing. It is also some verbs or words that kind of go along with it, adjectives, whatever. Electricity, energy, light, and movement. So if I take positive, life, technology, electricity, energy, light, and movement, and we look at the opposite of those things, you have negative, death, nature instead of technology or natural. And then you also have grounded instead of electricity, tired or maybe even weak for in place of energy. And then you got darkness or the lack of light. And then you have stillness or just, the lack of movement. And arc is the essence of life, light, power, and I guess the momentum of an object through the universe and just in general. And maybe what I'm going to refer to as D3, as in the third Darkness subclass. In my notes, I just wrote it as D3 because we don't know what it's going to be called or what it's going to be really. So D3 is the essence of death, darkness, weakness, and the stillness of an object through our universe, as interpreted by me in this video. Some stuff that you could, if you were to try to expand on death, darkness, weakness, and stillness, you could look at them as, the Grim Reaper. He's the taker of life. He is death. He's part of the universe. It needs to be there. Then you have like vampirism. This one was kind of a stretch for me, but vampires, and the vampirism, the idea of it is to, if you look in most video games, you can absorb health from one enemy to increase your health. And so that idea, I think, fits really well for the opposite of arc, as arc seems to provide life, or at the very least, like enhance life. And so I could see this as being a type of ability we could get in Destiny, that we're absorbing the health of our enemies, since we don't really have much like that in the game yet. And then birth is kind of an opposite. It's kind of an opposite of life. It's the beginning of life, whereas like later on in life, it's kind of the end of life. Or I don't know. I thought birth kind of sounded cool as like an opposite, even though it's kind of the same at the same time. But arc, it is strong, it's powerful, it provides power and life to stuff. But being born and birth is, you're really weak and needy, and so that's why I kind of see it as a bit of an opposite. Again, I'm grasping. We don't have anything to go off of here. And then maybe dead and still, the grave, being buried in the ground, and you're done. That's it, is another opposite to it. Incapable of movement. Now, something that's worth mentioning, the nightmares seem to be a little bit more vampiric. I don't even know if vampiric is a word, but they seem to be more like that in nature, as they feed on our fears and regrets and stuff like that. Our pains of our past, and they get stronger from that. So they're kind of, maybe, I doubt we're going to get any nightmare powers, and I'll explain why later. But another thing to mention is tormentors. They have, as they showed in the showcase, tormentors have light suppressing abilities, along with the ability to drain, our super energy, gameplay wise. And again, I don't think we're going to have these pyramid type powers. So while I don't think we're going to get nightmare or pyramid based powers, I did think those things were worth mentioning. Two other things that are worth mentioning are like taken powers or hive based abilities. Now, the reason why I don't think we're getting abilities like those is because we've yet to get anything like what the darkness uses. Hive magic is a mixture, again, I don't really know 100% sure, but it seems to be a mixture of, darkness, because they were blessed by the worms and the darkness. And so hive magic seems to be kind of a baby between the darkness and what the hive had already been using throughout the years. And the taken are, well, obviously, that's a darkness-based power when Oryx reached out into the deep and communed with the darkness, and what we can assume now is the witness gave him the ability to take other creatures. I suppose he could only take creatures that weren't light bearers, because he didn't take any guardians, at least that we know of. So it's not to say that we're not going to get those kinds of abilities ever, but I don't think that it's going to be the third Darkness subclass. I don't think they're going to be those, because they like to surprise us. Now, if another enemy race is using the third Darkness subclass, and we just copy them like we did with Stasis, that's a different thing. But Bungie's probably going to surprise us with something we've yet to see, rather than something we've seen for several years in the game. Those kinds of abilities, we're probably not going to get those. And we might get them later, but probably not soon. Probably not in the final shape. We'll probably get a different thing. So one theory I have is that we'll be able to get a type of sludge or goo based powers. Partially because we don't have anything like that yet. I mean, honestly, I think the closest thing we have to kind of a goo or a slime, a sludge kind of thing is like maybe void or solar. And neither of those things are even remotely, gooey. It's just that some of the abilities give off more of a gooey vibe, or a lava in the case of solar, and then maybe a slime in the case of void. But even those things, they really don't. They're really not gooey and slimy, but they're the two closest things we have in game that are similar to that. You could, the color really doesn't matter, but you could make it black with like red or maybe white accents, maybe even like brown accents or something. Maybe not all those, but do like a 2-color thing. I don't know what they would do, but I think making it black would be a cool thing, since we don't have any like black abilities yet. I think that would be really cool. The sludge could loosely be based on swamps and or like oil. Swamps are, scary and often associated with like monsters and death and stuff like that. And then there's oil, which I think is really cool, because oil, are the large deposits of oil that are in our earth. A lot of them are, from what I've understood anyway, due to the large amount of decomposition of something that was once living. So like even in the ground, if there was like a pile of dinosaurs for some reason, and then over hundreds of thousands of years or whatever, and they decompose, and eventually they turn into oil, and we use the oil for our purposes or whatever. But oil is very closely linked to death in that way. And I think that that's important whenever I think that, we might get a goo based ability. Oil is a goo, it's slimy, it's also tied to death. I don't know, it just makes sense to me. Especially since, if we're trying to make this kind of death, kind of powers for our guardians, how would we interpret that as human beings, or Exos and Awoken used to be human, so we're all technically humans. How would we interpret or translate this new power into something? How would we understand it? And maybe a goo, sludge, oil, swamp kind of thing may be how we go about it. Yeah, the abilities could be maybe similar to hive magic, corruption looking stuff, along with like mixed with the goo that the Taken kind of have associated with them. Now, the only reason I say those things is that if we're taking some new darkness powers that our guardian has stumbled upon somehow or another, and I'm thinking about how our guardian would interpret it, you could mix the idea of oil and swamps, sludge and stuff, and then you could mix that with what the guardian has fought countless times that are very closely tied to the darkness, like the hive and or the taken. And if you push all those kinds of ideas together, you could end up with this third subclass. Something that, you know, I don't know. This is kind of where my thoughts run dry on it a little bit. But one thing I want to mention is that I got a comment from someone on, I don't remember what video it was on. I think it was on my Strand subclass video, actually. My Strand subclass like breakdown, where I take all the footage that we have of Strand and I just kind of break it down to the best of my ability. So what this guy said was, his name is Alex Mercer, and he says, I think I figured out what Strand's playstyle and verbs will be using stasis and the trailer footage. Potential spoilers based on the paste bin leak that got Witch Queen and the 30th anniversary mostly correct. I didn't check the validity of that statement, but this is what he says. It said that although not a poison subclass, it is said like a poison-like effect would be a verb, and looking at stasis, it mirrors Solar's playstyle. Rather than be DPS focused or healing focused, stasis is about stopping enemies instead of killing them to boost your defense and regeneration abilities, and thus plays the opposite of how Solar plays. Since Strand is likely a mirror of Void, it could be DPS focused rather than debuff or buff focused. So instead of weaken to increase damage taken, it would increase your damage like Radiant, but it would be focused on your abilities. In the trailer, we see the Threadrunner use a melee and a dive to tangle up enemies together like Shadowshot's tether, which may mean a domino-like effect, like the domino effect from Dishonored 2. Combine that with a poison ability that does damage over time. These two verbs, domino and poison, would pair perfectly with the current subclasses, and it really would. This also means a Radiant-like ability that buffs DPS, since light subclasses boost damage, and stasis mostly buffs abilities. This would mean a verb like Radiant for Strand, but it would boost abilities instead of weapons, which I really like that idea. That could be really cool. Taking this all into account, Strand would have the opposite playstyle and be damage focused instead of debuffing like Void, just like how Stasis plays the opposite to Solar. That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, the reason I bring this up is that he's talking a lot about how these subclasses work and how they're the opposite, in how they function within the game, to what the other ability is. So if it is true that Void is the opposite of is the opposite of Strand, and that Solar is the opposite of Stasis, so that leaves us with Arc again, just like I was talking about earlier. I bring it up to say that Arc is focused on fast movement for ourselves. What if the opposite was true? So if it's focused on fast movement for ourselves, then if it was the opposite, so it wouldn't affect us, and then our abilities would affect the enemy. So we're not going to boost our enemy's speed, we're going to slow them down. And a sludge, slime kind of thing makes sense. Now we already have ice, like stasis, so when we use the slow abilities and stuff on them, but this would function a little bit different. It could be like a little puddle on the ground that we could create through various means, and enemies would get stuck in it. Something I think that would be really cool is that they could introduce, with this third subclass, they could introduce some interaction between different elements and different subclasses. So if you're running a solar weapon, or if you have a teammate that's using um, solar abilities, you could throw your sludge bomb kind of grenade or something at a group of enemies. It slows them, it deals a little bit of damage over time. But if you wanted to like amplify that, you could throw a solar grenade or shoot it with a solar gun or something, and it would ignite the goo, the oil, and it would begin to burn them. And I think that would be incredible. And you could mix in different stuff where you could have these subclasses that aren't the opposite from one another, but they have unique like interactions. So you could do stuff like stasis and like arc or something, and have them interact, since it's like ice is kind of like water, and then electricity in most video games, it's gonna amplify the damage if they're wet, so you could like freeze an enemy, but if you hit them with arc, then it performs like an arc stasis explosion or something, deals more damage. I'm kind of going off the rails a little bit, but I think it would be a good opportunity for Bungie to include some interaction between the different elements. I think that's something that that Destiny's missing a little bit, is some interaction between these. We have a little bit with Solar and Stasis and how they interact, mostly with the Titan's exotic pants. I have no idea what they're called. Path of the Burning Steps or something. I could be completely wrong. But basically what they do is like, you're not frozen for as long, and you don't take as much damage when you become unfrozen, and you're like harder to freeze and harder to slow, that kind of stuff. So they've already got the groundwork there, and they could definitely push it a little bit further. Now this is a completely different video. I ain't even going to get into this, but I will mention it. This could also create some kind of chaos kind of interaction between a light subclass and a darkness subclass, and that they're interacting to amplify each other and almost create a third, like a third form. So if you take one subclass, you take another subclass, you make them interact, whatever happens to those subclasses as they interact, it's like a third element that is mixed between the two. Again, I'm not going to get into that, but it's a cool idea. So yeah, if it is if we're looking at how these classes work, and that they're going to be the opposite from one another, again, arc buffs our speed, so maybe sludge would debuff the enemy's speed. If arc causes this arcing damage between enemies with the jolt, then I don't even know how this would be an opposite. Maybe, I don't know, maybe if you're closer to teammates, do you get a buff or something? I really have no idea how this would work as being like an opposite. But anyway, guys, I think that's about it for me. I ran out of my notes, and I ran out of stuff from one of the guys that commented on my video. So anyway, if y'all enjoyed the video, if y'all have any ideas, definitely let's discuss it below. I get a lot of comments, and we discuss a lot of stuff in a lot of my speculation videos, and I have a really good time talking to y'all. I reply to everybody. If I don't have a reply, then I'll at least like and heart your comment, just to let you know that I saw it, I read it. And I'll try to get back with y'all, and we can have a discussion, and maybe y'all will help me create the next video by just adding some more speculation in the comments. Yeah, anyway, guys, that's it for me. It's been your boy Pappy, and I will catch you guys in the next video.